Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. My guest today is President and CEO of Sigma Engineering and Construction, Robbie Olivier. Robbie is a relentlessly curious man whose leadership style and approach to business is something I've been able to admire now for some time because he allows himself to personally and professionally grow while also providing the space for tens upon hundreds of others to do the same. Mr. Robbie Olivier, how are we doing?
Great, buddy. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. So excited to have you part of GrowthReady as this podcast is introduced to the world. But as I will with all my guests from now on, before I introduce you properly, in one sentence, Robbie, tell us what it means to you to be growth ready.
Yeah, kind of have a on the nose response with that, I guess, is being prepared in general. I think we're all presented opportunities in life. And for me, I look back on certain opportunities that I wasn't ready for. And I don't look back on those with regret, but I look back on them and go, okay, well, how could I have been ready for those opportunities? And so growth ready to me really means do everything you can to prepare yourself so when those opportunities do come that you want, that you're actually ready to take advantage of them and be successful with them.
Love it. Preparation. We're going to get into that a little bit further. Before we do, let's give this man the introduction he certainly deserves. Robbie is the president and CEO of Sigma Engineers and Constructors, a destination workplace for both employees and clients in engineering, construction, field services, inspection, and leadership solutions. While his education and career tell the story of an engineer, a large part of Robbie's growth journey has come from playing in creative and innovative spaces as he embraces his pedigree for business and entrepreneurship, whether through real estate ventures, investing in other entrepreneurs and their businesses, or making his own wine, which I might add is delicious. Robbie's career and life story speaks to a very clear theme. It's a desire to grow and embrace what it means to ready yourself for what comes with it. So Robbie Olivier, welcome to GrowthReady.
God, that guy sounds awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet him.
Thank you. Thank you. Very humbled by that introduction, sir.
Yeah, but
high praise.
What's so wonderful about these introductions I write though sometimes is, and I like bringing this to everyone's attention immediately, is that I didn't have to make any of it up. The evidence is all there. Any research that I've done into you, and I've gotten to know you, and we'll get into it at some point too, is our professional relationship too. But what I love about that initial response to my first question was that came through in abundance in that introduction, an introduction that you had no part in writing, that you weren't aware of.
100%.
And right away, I just want to immediately double click on that notion of preparation. So one thing I believe in is when we learn these kind of lessons, typically there's something that had to teach us the lesson in the first place. So when was it, either professionally or personally, that you noticed that the lack thereof when it comes to preparation might just come around and bite you in the butt?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a ton of examples. I'll start with a brief analogy of the dog chasing the car, right? Well, what happens when the dog gets the car? Typically, the dog didn't have a plan, and now he's got the car, and now what, right? And I can give you plenty of examples of my own life. I will say thematically what I made an observation for me was that I was a high achiever and overachiever. I was very goal-driven. I would set these goals, and I would achieve them and not achieve any happiness or joy in that. It was just, okay, well, now I'm going to stress out because now I'm going to make another box to check. So there was no celebrating in that for me. And so I was literally just a dog chasing the car. Now I was a big dog and I was chasing big cars and I was catching them. But to what end, right? What satisfaction did that really grant me? It certainly wasn't bringing me alignment and peace. And so as I do, I kind of made alignment and peace my goal.
Interesting.
And really trying to be dedicated to having some joy in the process and in the journey as opposed to the achievement in and of itself. And I think where that came from, Steve, is I'll give you one quick story. So I had a former partner. We were 50-50. When I came to Sigma, he was the owner of Sigma. And I slowly kind of bought in throughout the years. But we were having a lot of success. I mean, the year he took over is the year I started at Sigma. We've had exponential growth since then, both as, individuals, as a company, financially, what we're capable of doing as a company, our offer is through the roof. And every year we were having tremendous success, but our relationship was very hard. And he is a wonderful human being, and he's a huge part of who we are today still. But it was just it got toxic for both of us. We were bringing out the worst in each other. And what's funny is I was so frustrated, so I went and hired a coach. Somebody told me I needed to do that. And that coach worked with me for a couple of months. And, man, she was a huge fan of mine. I was learning so much from her. She had great insights. It was super powerful. I'm like, man, she's going to meet my partner and really validate, like, how crazy this person is, and he's just not a great partner. And so I set up a meeting, and the three of us met, and everything happened as I predicted it would. Like, he triggered me, I got upset, he said a bunch of things I didn't agree with, and he and I got into it. I'm like, yep, she's going to see, and she's going to make me feel good about this. And then we're going to come up with a plan of how I'm going to fix him. And those are all literally what I was thinking, okay? Yeah. Very much had a victim mentality of the reason I'm not happy is because of that guy. Nothing I'm doing.
Sure.
Right? Well, I left that meeting. She left the meeting. I'm halfway home. I call her, and she goes, I knew you weren't going to wait. I said, yeah. So he's crazy, right? Like, he's a problem. She goes, so I do have an observation I want to share with you. I said, okay. And I almost got in a wreck when she told me this. She goes, he's not the problem, you are. I said, hold on, you're my coach.
Right.
She goes, yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm not here to talk about him. I want to talk about you giving up authority to people to dictate the mood you're in. She goes, he did nothing wrong, and he's going to sleep just fine tonight. You're the one losing sleep, and it's because you're choosing to react to things that don't matter. And, like, she just coached me through it, and the mind shift in that, the reason I share that story on this podcast, it was the beginning for me of shifting from a victim mindset, a scarcity mindset, and blaming other people for why I'm not happy mindset to I'm making that choice. And so I have a choice I could make, which is to basically learn how to stop letting things like that affect me. And maybe once I put my sword down, it'll allow him to be in a better headspace and make him more powerful and impactful. And that really became something I wanted to become so good at, and I still strive for that, is to be a positive impact and empower people. Yeah. And I always wanted to do that. I just went about it the wrong way. I was in my own head, and I had a victim mentality. And so I have shifted that mentality. Sometimes I fail at it. Actually, daily, I probably fail at it. But now I can honestly say that I really try to stretch myself and challenge myself. As soon as I feel that victimhood set in of, you're the reason I'm not happy, is really challenge myself to go, okay, well, what am I doing that's making me unhappy? Because that's the only thing I can control anyway, right? And I know that's hokey and it's all surface level, but that story literally changed the relationship I had with that man. And he's no longer a partner. We had a great, he got to retire early, and it was a wonderful celebration. We're still good friends. In fact, we're probably better friends now than we were as partners. And I learned so much of how to be a better person because of the experiences I had with him and that coach, right? Yeah. And then that just set me on this really a growth ready mentality of, okay, well, what else could I optimize and do better at? And I just became relentless in pursuit of every aspect of my life of where did I have these blind spots? What could I make better? That became my mantra.
Yeah. And before we get into all the what else and some of those blind spots, what I like about that entire insight is that if we were to just say, hey, let's just leave it at the surface, we can tell listeners, hey, be prepared. Okay, great. Appreciate the encouragement. Appreciate the insight. Thanks for that. For you to actually then expand upon it in a way where it's part of that preparation is understanding that at any point, emotion will be involved. And the likelihood of that emotion being double, triple, quadruple, whatever it may be, is going to grow the way in which, depending on the relationships that we have around us. So if we have people that are instigating this, then the way in which we prepare is probably not going to be as effective if we were to have these healthier relationships. And that really want people to hear that in the story is for you to be able to say, listen, I kind of had a vision and I thought I had a direction of where I was going. I knew this relationship was going to play a significant part. And I saw the relationship as a problem. And you weren't necessarily at the time realizing that the relationship itself could in fact influence, impact, and hurt where it was you were trying to get to. And in that awareness came, I have to assume, as you were alluding to, all this sort of exponential vision of just like, well, if I've been doing it here, where else have I been doing it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm an emotional guy. I'm a sensitive guy, to be honest with you. I know I don't always look that way. Like sometimes I look mean or tough or whatever I hear, but I can get caught in my head pretty quick, and I can get caught up in my feels. So I have a lot of empathy around people that behave emotionally. And it's okay to have emotions. We're humans. We have emotions and we have logic, right? And some of us have different, ratios and strengths and weaknesses in that. But to me, having a balance, having an awareness around your emotions, not judging your emotion, but just knowing what it is, and then asking yourself the question, is the way I'm behaving getting me what I want, right? And that is one of the most powerful questions I've ever learned to ask myself. And unfortunately, it took me probably over 40 years to learn to ask that question. And then not even worrying about the answer so much. That was really a problem for me for a long time, is having to have the answer. But what was more important is that I was asking the question and just allowing that to kind of be the lens I had these experiences through, really gave me some keen insight into, like if I could work on having a little higher emotional intelligence, if I could learn to have, not control the emotions, but at least let them empower me to behave in a powerful way with the emotion, as opposed to the emotion leading me. I lead it kind of thing. And I go back to the word authority. When you have authority over your emotion and the way you show up, you now can be intentional. You now can drive that result that you do want. And without that authority, you simply will not achieve it. Or at least I know it was impossible for me.
I hear that in abundance, and especially in the work that I do now, is so often when goals are presented to me and ideas and visions and mapping and all this kind of stuff, it's presented to me and I sit there and I just go, I want to know where it's coming from. Is it coming from a place of true authenticity, or is it coming from a passing comment that was made at a recent board meeting or executive meeting that has now influenced your entire perspective of how you may or may not do what it is you were planning or not planning to do, and to use a term like authority, I think what it does is it takes away the sugarcoating of our emotions and the importance of it. It's like, to say authority is to say this is significant. It's not just a thing. It's not just a way of doing it. It's actually in many ways, it could be the way. Like if you want to actually map out effectively for growth, it's to take authority over emotions. And I really would love any kind of anecdote or insight around what some of those steps or processes may look like for you now, when you maybe sense that you are losing some of that authority in certain moments, and then how you maybe re-equip yourself and re-implement authority in those moments.
Yeah. And I get the question a lot whenever I'm mentoring somebody or coaching somebody or just trying to help somebody. I hear you, I agree with you, but where do I start? Right. It's daunting and it's overwhelming. And then you kind of get on a doom loop of emotion around that. Like it can be very cyclical. I think the first approach I take now, and look, I've been through a lot of travels around this and a lot of successes and failures, but my approach now is pretty consistent in that, and I'm an engineer, so this really works for me, as I go into data gather mode. And what I've had to train myself to do, and this is very against my nature, is don't judge the data. Because as an engineer, I want to solve the problem, and I have knowns and unknowns, and I need the answer. That's literally like my value as an engineer, right?
Right.
But as a human being and a person that wants deep, meaningful, and impactful relationships, that's not how people work. And it's not how I work, actually. And so I started to kind of be lighter on myself. I've always been very, very hard on myself. But just allow myself to not know the answer and just be curious, as opposed to anxious, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but that mindset allowed me to really ask better questions, and greater answers were revealed to me. There was a lot more peace around that. And look, I had a lot of successes and failures with that, but what it opened me up to was, oh, you went to a certain training that coached up, how to have better, alignment of purpose kind of thing. That's a phrase I kind of use a lot, but sure. I'd see somebody, I love the way that they move through the world, and I'm going, wow, how do I get more of that, right? And so I'd ask them questions, and I would just get to know them better. And then, oh, you have a coach. What's that look like? What does that mean? How do I find a coach? What does that look like?
Right.
and what books are you reading? And again, with the GrowthReady mindset, to bring it back to the theme of the podcast, it became my singular focus. I was relentless in the pursuit of attaining that lifestyle and that mentality. I wanted that happiness, that peace. So it made me open. And then I'd read a book, I'd share that book with somebody, they'd share another one with me. I'd go to an awesome training course. Hell, I might wind up facilitating a training course. We started a leadership company that provides training, and just leaned into my passions and then learned from other people and was just way more open to experience. So I went from, I know all the answers, and I could be very condescending and very arrogant around that and very defensive when someone tried to help me. That was the one thing I had to break. Yeah. More than anything is everyone that tried to help me, I went out of my way to let them know I don't need your help, right, when I so desperately needed it. Right. Amen. And the irony in that, I look back on it now and I can laugh at myself, but man, if I could go back 15 years ago and talk to myself like, dude, you're an idiot. Like, just stop. Yep. Let people in, let them help you. You don't have to be the guy that knows all the answers all the time, right? And so I know that was kind of a around the world answer to your question, but to me, the mind shift has to occur before you put the plan in place to go do the things to reach your goal. Yeah. Because you're not going to be able to lay out like a 5-point plan when you don't even know where to start and you don't even have the clarity of what it looks like yet. You kind of have to go, for me, I had to go through exploration, collect the data, and then once I had enough data where I'm like, okay, I think I can pull this together and come up with some hypotheses on where I might want to go next. And then once I had those, I go, okay, so what are those next steps? Let me go ask some more questions. Let me go do some research. Okay, that sounds good. I'll try that. And another thing I'll tell you that was really powerful is I had no problem with going 3 steps down this road and going, yeah, this doesn't feel right, and going right back and going down the road I didn't pick before. I have no problem with pivoting. And that's not to say I'll give up on something necessarily, but being open-minded that, okay, this isn't quite working, I'm going to try something else. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And something that I really want to bring to folks' attention there, that you said a couple minutes ago, is that you were relentless towards the right mindset. It wasn't a relentless mindset. In fact, what I'm catching there is like the relentless mindset is kind of what got you in trouble. It's just like that's what prevented you to listen effectively, to welcome feedback effectively, all these things. But the relentlessness, you could, and the point I like to make here is that you could still use what came so naturally to yourself. That energy of relentlessness was within you. So instead of a coach coming along and saying, don't be relentless, be this, that's not what was being told to you. It's like, actually, that energy is serving you a ton. Don't let that go, but just reassign it. Put it somewhere that can be effective so that you're moving towards this mindset, as you put it, that can serve you as opposed to hurt you. And that is where we now land on the curiosity piece, in my opinion, because I think clearly that guy before those awakenings wasn't overly curious. He was pretty clear and set in how he was going to do things. And then you suddenly shift almost 180 to this version of yourself that is now completely curious. And you've shared with me off air before, it's just you do define yourself as a relentlessly curious individual. So there we are again with the relentless energy, but you've now landed on curiosity. Tell us how curiosity is serving you today. Let's not go backwards here. Talk to me about how curiosity is serving you right now.
One, alignment, a purpose, better relationships, deeper connections. Where in the past, well, I know you didn't say focus on the past, but to give you comparison, in the past in a relationship, I'd be pretty quick to judge all the things that didn't work or what that person did that I didn't like. Where now I don't dwell on that as much. And that was organic to me. So for me to make that shift was a massive deal. To where now I can give myself grace. I can give people around me grace. I'm way better to be around, I would say. Most people would probably say that.
I mean, you are also defining about 7 of the 8 billion people on this planet while you talk about this.
Yeah, turns out I am a human being.
Right, you are a human. Carry
on. But I think just instead of getting caught up in judgment, it's really allowed me to be a little more open-minded and go, okay, right here, this is where a person might have given up on this person that I'm talking to right now. But I still see an opportunity there where instead of focusing on all the things that person's doing wrong right now is, man, I wonder if I can be for that person what so many people have been for me and just help them get out of their own way a little bit. Now, I've had successes and failures with that. It's not my job to fix people. Again, it took me 40 years to learn that lesson. But I find great joy and purpose in being able to be there for somebody when they feel like maybe other people haven't been.
Right.
And I'm very driven by that.
Yeah.
And so I do think that my relentlessness is unique to me. And I've always been curious, but it's always been shadowed by my probably arrogance and my need to prove to you how much I know, right? And so the curiosity has really allowed me to let go of having to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
That was so important to me for most of my career, most of my life, even going back to when I was a kid. It was so important that people really viewed me as highly intelligent that could solve all the problems, right? Which of course is not an attainable goal, right? And it brought me no joy.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's why the shift has really been put more into the curiosity, because it's literally by making that shift, I'm sending the message that I actually don't know. That's why I'm curious.
Yep.
And so it's helped me to be more vulnerable and open at the beginning of a relationship and say, hey, I just want you to know something. And you might not like this about me, but I'm actually not perfect. I don't know all the answers and I'm probably gonna let you down.
Right.
So where can we go from here?
Yeah.
Right. And just my relationships feel better.
Yeah.
You know, I feel better with that.
I think that's such an important piece, is to capture what you've said there, is those were all human elements, you know, and it's why I loved the way you answered the question. I'm glad I even asked the question the way I did, because I could have easily led you down when I said today, I could have said within your role as CEO, but I didn't say that. I just wanted to say today, I wanted to leave it open-ended like that, for you to allow listeners to understand that you're in the space of human performance. Like, you're performing as optimal Robbie, and it just so happens that on any given day, optimal Robbie can be the CEO and president of Sigma. He can be this investor over here. He can be this partner over there. Like, whatever it is, he can be a dad. He can be a husband. He's all these other things too. But that curiosity is serving you as the CEO that you are, the same way that it's serving you as the husband and father that you are. Like, this is just how you are showing up to be ideally the best version of you, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah. And look, I think one thing that I've had to learn, and look, with any shift, you go through a transition and you have successes and failures and doubts and all that kind of stuff. But I've had to learn that I'm not perfect at this either.
Right.
And there's days where I'm going to fail at that, and just kind of learning to give myself some grace. And the gift that's given me is I can give that grace. Where in the past, as the pressure I put on myself, well, that's the gift I was giving to the people around me, was a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations, you know, and just kind of being a psycho.
Yep.
And you mentioned being a dad and a father. I think sometimes, especially for A-type personalities and people that have lived most of their lives as an overachiever, you feel like you have to be amazing at everything all the time, or you're going to let everybody down.
Right.
Like, because you're valued, everybody is you're awesome at everything. And maybe they're living vicariously through you, or maybe they have you on a pedestal and you just don't want to let them down, kind of thing. And it's an imposter syndrome thing. And it's an affliction I've definitely suffered from, especially when you're the owner and CEO of an organization that has success. People look at you a certain way that maybe isn't quite reality on how you live your life. And I chased that for a long time, is just try to make sure I show up the way people expect me to.
Right.
The problem is it's just not authentic.
Yep.
And it's not genuine.
It also doesn't sound comfortable either.
It
sounds really uncomfortable.
It is so awful. And that's why when you talk, and look, I'm in a lot of CEO roundtables and a lot of other entrepreneurs, and we talk about these kinds of things because we really can only relate to each other.
Sure.
Right. And there's things I struggle with, that I get challenged with, that I absolutely would not want to put on my employees or people that I'm trying to teach. Right. So we try to do it there. And I got to tell you, a lot of entrepreneurs, I would say the majority of CEOs I know, are not happy people. I mean, divorces, and they may have private jets and the cars and whatever else, you know, they're chasing, but there's a lot of lack of joy at this level.
Yep.
And really, when I was at my lowest in this, I was just determined. I said, I'm either not going to be in that role, or I'm going to have to figure out how to do it differently, because my family's too important to me. My wife's too important to me. My kids are too important to me. And these people here are too important. And that was the challenge I put to myself, is if I can find joy in this, one, having joy in success instead of making success create more pressure, and be happy here, then I think our people would also be more happy if they're working with a guy that is bringing joy instead of pressure all the time, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's been a huge driver for me, for sure. And to go back to, I just thought of something when I said my wife, talk about being growth ready. So our first date,
Yeah.
all right, within 30 minutes, I literally, in 30 minutes of the conversation, said, I'm going to marry this broad. And I've been thinking about this in preparation of this podcast. How many relationships failed because, in my life, failed because I was not growth ready? Now, I could sit here and rattle off the list of reasons why that person wasn't right for me or whatever. But I was married before, and I had a job with that person. She's a wonderful woman, and neither one of us were growth ready, I can assure you, right? But when I sat down and had the first beer with Janae, I'm like, I'm actually ready for this. I wasn't looking for it, but I'm ready. And now there's a possibility for this to be very successful and awesome, right? That is the perfect possible analogy I can give you for being growth ready, is the opportunity was there. And had I not been ready for that in my life, I would have ruined it. We would not be married and not have children today. So
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And hey, folks, like, you thought this was just for leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs. It's a premarital podcast too. So we are covering the bases, folks. We are covering the bases. But, you know, we share a similar story when it comes to our better halves. And, you know, one thing I've been encouraged to do from a lot of our listeners is like, Steve, tell us about you a little bit more, brother. Like, you just you pass it over to the guests too often, and you don't. This is a great opportunity for me just to really piggyback off that point in the same way that, you know, I met my wife when I was 31, and had I met her, I to this day I thank God that I never met her a day earlier. Like, if I'd met her a day earlier, I would have screwed it up, because for whatever reason, the day I met her was the day I was growth ready for everything that has come since. Amazing. And what I love about this past sort of 3 or 4 minutes here is that we are now getting to the heart of how growth can be sustainable, because it's clear based on those first 10, 15 years that you described to us that there was just no way that could have lasted. And if it did last, you would be a version of yourself today that you wouldn't want to be around. And chances are anyone that's close to you wouldn't want to be around. And the sustainability for growth comes with the willingness to work on being ready for growth. And part of that readiness is everything that you're talking about, the human side of it. Talk to me, I guess, when you use that word joy, and whenever I hear the word joy, and you just think, man, this is a podcast for business leaders and executives and all this kind of stuff. And like, we're talking about joy now. It's like, yeah, we're going to talk about joy for a minute. Like, what is it, Robbie, that's giving you joy right now in your world when you think about it?
I can see things clearer. I can see the impact that I'm having. And sometimes it's not always the impact I want to have, but I do believe that I'm, for the most part, being a positive influence on the people that I want to be a positive influence on, the people I care about. I feel like when I see them have success, and I can point to, hey, I was a part of that success, that fills my cup, right? Yep. And that gives me joy. And look, not everybody's chasing joy. I certainly wasn't for a very long part of my life. Sure. And I'm not saying I'm right or wrong about that, but what I know is for me, it was lacking. And I was having health issues. My relationships were very troubled. And I was just not happy. I was not aligned. And it didn't allow me to serve what I think my purpose is. So I was totally out of alignment and just stressed all the time. It was just a horrible way to live. And look, on the surface, I checked all the boxes. I did all the things that I was supposed to do, that my family expected me to do and society expected me to do. And I'm looking in the mirror going, how are you unhappy? You have awesome kids, a great house, a beautiful company I work with, and I'm doing all these things. How in the world am I unhappy? This is ridiculous. Yeah. And I literally went home and talked to Janae and said, I either have to stop being an entrepreneur and CEO, or I'm going to have to figure out how to do it in a different way and allow people to help me do this. And I have a wonderful executive team here and just wonderful people here that really share the burdens of running a company.
Right.
But I had to give up that authority. I had to give up that control to an extent to where they could go and be empowered and do things, right? To where I could go work on myself more and be a better value to them. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't even remember what the question was at this point, but
it was about joy, man. And then we're just, whenever I ask a question about something like joy, I want you to move to some form of euphoria where we're not even remembering where we are.
That's what just happened.
That's just happened. You just found some euphoria. I love it. But there's so much about your experience and history that makes sense when you like, okay, I can see how a CEO decides to move into the investment world, real estate, partnering with other companies, and then suddenly we land on this wine thing, and we go, hang on a second, this is the one where it's like these all we can kind of find the connection from A to B to C to D here, but then wine seems to be Z all by itself over here. So now that we're in this space of curiosity and finding joy, clearly wine gives you joy. As I look over at your plastic cup with wine in, what I really want to just get to here is, how did this come about, and maybe how did so many of these stories and insights you've already shared with us, what kind of role did they play in this whole project?
Yeah, look, I'm a super passionate guy, and anybody in my world knows, like, oh shit, Robbie's on a new thing, right? And it's never fleeting. It's like once I'm on it, like it's a thing I do now, right? And as my dear friend Anthony Renato will tell you, I'm into like card collecting and the hobby now, as they call it, and I'm like all in, right? And so when I get excited about something, I do my research, and I just want to have the full experience of it. And for me, fine spirits, like I love great whiskeys and great tequilas, and I love the science and the art and kind of the romance of them. And wine, I mean, my gosh, it's like the culmination of art and science and joy and relationships. And those are the things I can see with that product. And it's not something I organically like grew up with. I won't tell you the whole story because it's a long one, but effectively, a really good friend of mine was getting married in Napa, and my wife and I went and did a bunch of wine tours, and I just fell in love with the people that made wine, because they were there to tell stories and get you drunk and get you to buy their product, and you were more than happy until you got your credit card statement a month later. But then you'd create a special occasion to drink the wine with people that weren't with you, and to share that story, and then they would share a bottle with you, and then I would get smarter about what I was tasting and learning what I loved about what I liked. It's such a great parallel for the joy in life for me, and the hard work that goes into it, and all the factors. Like, there's so much that goes into that wine being great, and sometimes it's not great, and you fail. Like, it's all the things that I'm all about. And I met just amazing people, and it was the culmination of entrepreneurs, passionate people that wanted to bring joy to other people. And they were wildly driven, relentless in their pursuit of how to achieve those things. I'm going, man, how am I not a winemaker? Like, you guys are, that's all my things, right? And so through the business connection, plus I have a baseball background, there's some of those amazing winemakers out there are big baseball guys. And we just connect on so many levels. It brought us so close together. And one of them, his name is Grant Long Jr., who is one of the most exquisite winemakers in the world, just absolutely fabulous human being. He and I hit it off probably 15 years ago. He was literally bootlegging his wine at another winery. I don't know how much more I can say about that. I apologize. But I didn't even know that at the time. He was kind of faking it until he made it. And now he has two of the biggest appellations over there in Napa. He's like a legend. Yeah. And so I was one of his kind of first, right? And so we teamed up on a little project. He has a little program, like a little barrel program that we tried. And he sent me 3 different things to taste, and we went through all the tasting notes, and I pretended like I knew what I was doing, and I picked one out, and then worked with them to design a label and all those things. And I really did it as a project to go, okay, I want some wine for Sigma, because it's a really good wine. Yeah. At least I liked it a lot. And so for our Christmas party, we have a big Christmas party every year. I wanted to serve Sigma wine at the Sigma party. So it's all from the same barrel. It's awesome. I created a label for Sigma and a label for my family, the Olivier Family Reserve. And we wrote a little note on the back of it and all that stuff. And it kind of got out of control. I actually just figured I'd lose my ass on it, because it's not a cheap thing to get into at all. But then people started asking me, can I get a case of this, case of that, present company included. That's right. And I had such a limited production in that first year, because I really thought it was for Sigma and my personal collection, hand them out as Christmas gifts maybe. And then Grant asked me one day, he goes, you're handing those out as Christmas gifts? Like, do you know how expensive those bottles are? Do you know what they should sell for? I'm like, no, I have no clue. And he told me, I'm like, oh, okay, I need to stop doing that. Yeah. Which of course I didn't, because it just makes me so happy to be like, I hope you really enjoy this. And so when I hear you and your wife, Brittany, is she loves wine, and I know she's particular. And so when you told me she loved the wine, it just made me so happy that I could actually be a part of that and present that joy, and know that I served a value. So
And you made me look good too.
I did.
It's
I did.
always
Got
in
you
the
some
win
brownie
column.
points.
Husband win column. Boom. I appreciate that. But no, but I do want to capture something here, which is super important. Is, folks listen to this that are thinking about pursuing something for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're in a job and they're comfortable in the job and they want to have the side hustle, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
There was something about the timing and the way in which you went about that project, which makes it clear that it wasn't just simply, hey, I have some resources financially and I just want to do something fun. It was truly aligned with the way in which you were showing up and doing all of these other areas in your life. And it's why it's not only did it make sense to do, but as someone who's lived in high performance as long as I have, it doesn't surprise me in the least that it was good and successful because you were approaching it with that mindset.
Yeah.
You weren't just saying, oh, I have the resources to invest in some form of wine. Hopefully it's good. You were, listen, I want to be involved in this from the outset. I want to form the relationships and I want the eventual product to be something that can provide X, Y, and Z in a way that's going to leave people wanting more. So the care and the detail around the process just came through, but it all started because when you got to the starting line, you were ready to go through that process because you did the work on you before you went through the process.
Yeah, I was ready for it, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you, the first time I went to Napa, I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
I mean, we could barely afford. I was standing in the wedding, so I had to go.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going there with some kind of grand scheme to get into wine. In fact,
Right.
that didn't happen for probably 12, 13 years later when I was ready for it.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, too, one thing is very important. I don't just chase every single rabbit.
Right.
I have check boxes that have to be checked and they're non-negotiable before I decide. And it has to be a person that I profoundly believe in, and it has to be a business or project I can passionately get my head wrapped around because I know me. I will go all in. And if I go all in on something I'm not passionate about or a person I don't believe in, it will crush me. And I've done it.
Yeah.
I've made plenty of mistakes. I've invested in, maybe it was the right person but not the right business, or maybe it was the other way around. Or maybe that person wasn't ready for the growth mindset or the energy I brought. And I've learned that that's now one of those, and every one of those I don't even want to call them failures. Every one of those things that didn't work out, I've added check boxes to my process to where, like, you know what? I don't want that result again. So what filter can I put in place to mitigate that result again? And and that's that relentlessness of I always analyze it that way, every experience. And so to bring it back to the wine thing, one, the person is amazing in Grant. I'm super passionate about him. He's a wonderful human. And the product is, I can be really passionate about it, and I can authentically say I thoroughly enjoy it, and it meets my standard of expectation in terms of the quality of the product. And so, and look, I can also tell you, I do almost none of the work. I mean, I designed the label. I mean, he calls me a vintner, which is great, but like, he's the one who does all the work.
Right.
Right. And so I try to be very clear with people about that. I'm not over there stomping grapes,
Right.
you know? But what I've learned too is that's most people that have wine. And you said earlier, a lot of people just write checks and they don't do tastings. They just, hey, I need a label and I'm going to go make money off of this wine. And a lot of people are very successful in doing that. But that's not why I did this.
Right.
Right. To me, I'm very passionate about it. It's authentic to who I am. It very much speaks to my taste, and it's not for everybody. But it definitely reflects, who I am, my palate, and that kind of thing. And I love that I can tell stories around it. There's all kinds of crazy stories around it too. So it through my process checked all the boxes of, yes, this is something I want to get into. It's not going to be cheap. People are going to be like, what the hell are you doing now? Like, why are you doing that now? You're being distracted. And,
Right.
But that's one of my boxes, is it's going to pull me off of my goals.
Yeah, and it's so important there's two things, and I definitely want to touch on failure before we wrap up. Like, when you align with your purpose, your intentions, your why, it should never be a distraction.
Right.
It just shouldn't be. And I get that a lot. I hear those stories way too much. It's just, someone presented me an idea and I went with it, or I had this idea or someone told me I'm really good at this, so I gave it a go. And it's just like, but did it align with, was there a why? Was there an intention? Was there a purpose behind it? Because if there wasn't, I'm curious, how did it work out? And 99 times out of 100, not well.
I've literally never had an endeavor or a concept I've had work out or I wasn't connected to why I was doing it at all. I mean,
Yep.
and I've done plenty of stuff where I'm like, damn, I see the upside here. I can make money on this. And that I get presented with these opportunities on a weekly basis. And I've finally learned that I don't have to actually say yes to all of them. And so now I'm I scrutinize to a great level of detail before I get into these things, just because I know how I am. I'm going to go all in. And I literally have to go to my wife and make a request. Like, hey, look, the next month or so, just know I'm not going to be as present as, I'd like to be, because I really need to dive into this and make sure it's something I want to do. And she knows my process, and we get to negotiate terms on this, right? And she, obviously, they're the priority for me. But that process has allowed me to take on projects that I know, one, I'm going to love the project itself, the people I'm working with, and it sets me up for the best possible way to have success and joy in those things. And to what you said earlier, not everybody can understand that. A lot of people get confused by that. And sometimes I have a perception issue where, like, God, Robbie's getting into a lot of things. Like, is he distracted from running Sigma?
Right.
But one of my check boxes has always been, will this allow me to show up better for Sigma?
There you go.
And so some of the other things I've gotten into, Cards and Culture is a company I've partnered with here recently. And some of the other things I do have actually allowed me to stop trying to control every aspect of Sigma, because Sigma's been my baby for so long and I care about it so much. But doing those other things and allowing some of this energy to go into other projects like the wine and other things have actually allowed me to take a breath and not be so psychoanalytical about every minute detail and not be a micromanager. Let people breathe, let people make mistakes, let their ideas come through. I wouldn't even listen before,
Right.
because this is all I did. And I was choking it to a degree.
Right.
And I think since I've opened myself up to being more of an entrepreneur, not just a CEO, it's allowed me to show up in a way that's way more aligned with my personality and things I want out of life. And if I'm doing a self-assessment, I think I show up a lot healthier here than I ever have before. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying for everybody. I'm clear. I get reminded of that on a daily basis. But I feel good about the work I do when I go home, and I'm excited to come here in the morning. And a lot of that's because I'm doing these other things so I can have that space to go do those other things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the ability to step back from Sigma, you're allowing the people here to go through the very process that you described to us. You're allowing them to learn as they go, to potentially fail.
Yeah.
Ideally, not to a point where the failure can't be somehow recovered from. But the point being is, how can these folks find that lane the way you found that lane if they're never given the freedom to go down the lane by themselves in the first place? And that's coming through in abundance, which immediately allows us to easily move towards the notion of failure. And something you said before is the willingness just to go 3 steps down, learn that it may be the wrong 3 steps, and then pivot or go back to where you started from, whatever it may be. I want to try this question on a little bit differently, in the sense of, why should anybody listen to this buy that? Because if we hear it all the time, like, don't be afraid of failure, or some of my greatest lessons come from failure. But it's one thing to say that when you're the person that's gone through the failure, come out the other side of the failure, learn from the failure, and now are somehow successful because of that failure. Someone's going to be listening to this right now that's like, yeah, but I'm still scared. Like, why should they listen to this insight and step into it?
Well, let me start my answer off by saying I'm not saying anybody should listen to anything I have to say. Okay. And I feel silly that people actually are coming to me for insight, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I struggle with that part of this, if I'm being totally vulnerable with you.
Right.
So all I can do is speak to what I know
Right.
and what I've experienced. Hopefully it helps someone.
Yeah.
And I mean that with all my heart. Look, the reason I said it the way I did is because I've always been fixated on being right and having the solution. And so if I were to admit that the path I chose might not be the right path, then I'm a failure, and why would you want to be around me anymore? Because my value to you is that I'm right and I have all the answers. I mean, that's literally how I've lived 4 decades of my life. The irony is, when I became open-minded to at least try it a different way, a lot more people would gravitate to what I had to say when I could say, shit, you know what? I don't know this is working, guys.
Right.
And I meet a lot of resistance with that. I'll get challenged that, hey, you're not committed. You're not sticking to the plan. You haven't tried this enough, whatever. And I get that. But something I've tried to hone in as a talent is being very skillful in seeing, hey, am I doing this because I'm fixated on this particular path working, or am I doing this because I believe it will be the best opportunity for me to succeed? And those are two very distinct questions. Yep. And when the second one is asked and you actually think about it, you're like, shit, I'm just stuck and fixated on making this work, as opposed to, there's another way to potentially do this. And all I got to do is get over my ego and the embarrassment of not being right the first time and be open to it working again. I think a lot of people don't do that, because what happens if you fail the second fucking time? Right? And I don't know if I can say that on this podcast.
We might bleep out the F-bombs. It's like more like PG-13 space.
Right.
So,
Sorry. Sorry.
It's okay.
But again, that is a failure and a scarcity mindset. If you're constantly worried about how you're going to fail, well, you're never going to succeed. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? And so, and I'm not saying just go out there and try everything all the time, but you cannot possibly live in the fear that you're going to fail and let that petrify you to not try. And just know going into it and accept it and get used to it that you're going to look silly, you're going to embarrass yourself, and you're going to do it in spectacular fashion if you're doing it right. Right? To me, the key is not whether or not you're going to succeed or fail in every endeavor you do. It's what are you willing to learn from it, right? And I get very passionate about this because I did it a really unhealthy and unsuccessful way for a long part of my life. And for me, what's brought me a lot of knowledge and success and joy is I almost embrace when I see something not going the way I wanted it to a degree. Because I'm like, all right, here's another opportunity for growth. And I've got to embrace that. If I really want to keep climbing and be driven to growth, is I have to learn how to really appreciate when things don't go my way. Because if they go my way, great, pat myself on the back, celebrate it, that's awesome, let's enjoy that. What did we learn from it? Okay, well, I learned a lot more from the things that I didn't get right. So, and I just don't get stuck on it as much as I used to. But look, I'm not saying it's easy. All of our decisions are high stakes. Every decision you make impacts the rest of your life. And so I'm not saying I take these things lightly, and I'm not saying I don't have fear. And I actually hate the word fearless, because what does that even mean?
There's just no truth to it.
To me, it's the other way, is do you have courage? And the only way for me to have courage is to be connected to what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Who am I doing it for? Right? And if the answer to that question is anybody but myself, I shouldn't be doing it.
Right. What you did there in that answer is you help folks see that we really can only qualify something as a failure when we're pursuing something that is logical, that should be part of a strategy in itself. Like, to your point, if we're just going hell bent down the road and saying, I'm going to figure out a way to make this right, every time we don't get it right, that's not really a failure. That's just proof of ignorance at a certain point. It's just like, okay, if we actually want to say, listen, if we know why we're going this way and what we want to get out of this, and we're being curious, and we're doing it for the right reasons, we got the right people, we're building the right relationships all through this process, and any and every time we hit some sort of bump or wall, yes, it's a failure, but it's a failure that makes sense, because we were supposed to arrive at the failure. We wanted the failure because it's actually confirming whether or not we should keep going on this route. And in doing so, we can now make a pivot of any kind towards a better route. But it's all from that premise of logic. Like, we started down this road for a reason. We're not doing it because my mom told me I was really good at this and I should just give it a try, and these are the 5 ways that you're successful. Like, that's...
Yeah, and I think so many of us live our lives well into our adulthood trying to meet the expectations of our parents.
Oh, we're not going to go there.
Well, I don't mean to dive deep into that. What I'm saying is, I go back to what I just said, is if you're asking yourself, who are you doing this for?
Right.
I was actually shocked when I started asking that question, because I'm going, wow, none of what I'm doing is actually for me. And the irony is, I was seen as selfish and arrogant. Like, what a really difficult thing to navigate mentally, right?
Yeah. And that's, and again, jokes aside, it is an important insight in the sense of knowing why you're doing it or who you're doing it for. I'm curious, just in your opinion, is it important that you're doing it for you above all people, or how high are you holding yourself on that level of importance?
I think that's a slippery slope for me to say it's above all people. I think the way I choose to look at it is, I need to make sure that I'm grounded, that I'm taking care of myself.
Okay.
I very much will put others before me in certain scenarios that doesn't serve me or that person very well. I find that when I'm committed to, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to take care of myself.
Yep.
And that puts me in the best possible situation to serve this person. It's not selfish at all. In fact, it's the best gift I feel like I can give, because you know that I'm not going to sacrifice myself to help you,
Right.
So to speak, right?
Yep.
Like I want it to be healthy for both of us. And that took a lot of maturing and hard work for me to get to that standpoint, because my definition of serving other people was to be selfless, right? And my definition of humble and humility were not grounded in actually authentic reality.
Yeah.
And so learning to be true to myself, well, of course I want to take care of myself. But for some reason, I just wouldn't admit that before, because that felt selfish, right?
Right.
So it's not, I don't look at it as let me place myself above you. It's, one, I need to make myself a priority. Period. Just that simple. Like, I need to be a priority. My health and happiness is paramount. And I can hold other people's health and happiness paramount too, but not more than they do for themselves. And so if I'm going to put that on them, I've got to do the same thing when I look in the mirror, right?
Yeah, I love it. And so much of the work I do today and the why behind this podcast is helping people see that when it comes to our growth, when it comes to our readiness, are we able to pursue high or optimal performance without it coming at the expense of our optimal self? And we're hearing that from you. There was a chapter where it certainly was. We're now living the chapter where it's not. And you're finding ways to at least do that consistently. Like you said before, you're not perfect and you're not going to do it perfectly every single day. But to wake up with that intention at the least each and every day means that you're always going to be much more likely to be pursuing optimal performance without it coming at the expense of your optimal self. Brother, listen, you know we could go longer, mainly because, and this is the big reveal, Robbie is a client of mine. He is one of my coaching clients. And before I let you have the final word, I do want to just simply acknowledge I'm proud of you just for the insights that you provided on this show, because it's important for people to understand that these kind of discussions they're not the kind of discussions you're having every day. They're just not. And that's what I'm really excited about this next phase and chapter of the podcast, is that I want people to come into this environment knowing that they're going to have a conversation that makes them somewhat uncomfortable. You know, we don't want to stay at the surface. We want to go far beneath the surface. And I appreciate you doing that with us here today, because I think there's insights here that I would like to believe, at least, whether it's folks within Sigma, folks within your network, folks that are getting to know you for the first time, whatever it may be, people are hearing the need for more people like you to get in a seat like this and have these kind of conversations, because it's going to help people that maybe one day see themselves, or at least want to see themselves, in a similar seat to that of yours. So that was probably the most uncomfortable I made you this entire time.
I want to hit the eject button right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
It means the world coming from you. It honestly does. And you are such a fabulous coach and a powerful influence, and not just my life, but this company and a lot of other people I care about. You're a true gift. And I do not do podcasts, or at least I haven't. This is actually the second one I've done in 2 weeks. And you're one of the main people that has convinced me that there's some people out there that might be interested in this. I'm still wrapping my head around that. I don't mean that like I'm a humble guy kind of way. It's just, it's difficult for me to connect to why someone would actually want to sit down and listen to me. So if you were listening to this, if you're still listening, thank you. I'm honored that I can hopefully provide you something that you can be curious about. And I really do. I'm better one-on-one. I'm not great with a camera in front of me, but I do enjoy discussing this type of stuff and having a deeper connection. And typically I find one-on-one, that's my target, so I can get a feel for, am I helping that person or not? Right. In this setting, it's a little bit harder for me to connect to that. Yep. So I do appreciate you reiterating that for me. And I'm also super honored to be the first guest on GrowthReady. I didn't even put that together until this morning. Like, holy cow, that's a big deal. That's awesome.
Let's go.
I'm proud of you, man. I'm pumped for you. This is such a great platform, and I've been with you long enough. I've kind of got to watch your process of coming up with this concept, and I've immediately when you said the words, I'm like, oh my God, I see it. Like, I am so all in on this, and just being able to explore this with you and be a part of the journey and to kick it off with you is just a huge compliment for me, to just be a part of your journey, dude. You're just awesome. And thank you for being who you are, being a gift to everybody.
Well, I appreciate that. And people have definitely stopped listening now that we're just stroking each other's egos. But listen, man, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask you I'm going to challenge you here, the external processor that you are, to keep this short and brief. Why do we need to keep pursuing growth?
You're going to tell me to keep that a short answer.
Come on, make it short.
Okay, for me, if I'm not growing, I'm dying.
And that'll do us right there. That'll do us. Robbie, Olivier, appreciate the time. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
An incredible discussion with Mr. Olivier, and I'm so thankful for the time, so thankful that he and I were able to sit down in his place of work there at Sigma and simply have a discussion that allowed you, the listener, to get a better understanding of what it looks like to go from being in a place where you start out curious, but you don't know much. But you understand that there's this appetite within you to simply learn more. And that curiosity can serve you so well. In fact, that curiosity can be at the heart of what it means to be ready. When we think about some of the areas that Robbie discussed with us here, one thing that really comes to mind that can be either a benefit of that curiosity or it can hurt you is the acquisition of data. He talked about it a few times, and that it's one thing to acquire data and to have a better understanding. It's another thing to go all in on what it is you acquire, become so dependent on it that it can actually prevent you from responding naturally, authentically, utilizing and truly benefiting from any kind of intuition that you've maybe developed over the years. So it's one thing for us to be curious, and it's another thing for us to use that curiosity to acquire data. But at the same time, when we get that far in and we become that connected with information, it's then on us to take a step back and say, what do we need? What can we maybe either avoid, ignore, put to one side, hold off for another time? And then how do we now move forwards? How can we find that balance of our most authentic self while at the same time utilizing and benefiting from the results of the curiosity that can be in the form of data? It's something for you to think about, because maybe you've been on both sides of this. Maybe you've just been abundantly curious and you've gone about acquiring as much data as you can, and all you do is refer to the data, and you're left frustrated because for whatever reason you're not seeing the results that you want to see. But on the flip side, maybe you're not being curious. Maybe you're not necessarily acquiring data, but you're using that curiosity just to step into the unknown. And again, you're left feeling somewhat unequipped because you don't have any information, any education, again, any data that can serve you. We have to find that balance, but we have to be willing to get that repetition to find that balance. And Robbie's story speaks to that in abundance. And I'm just so appreciative that he was able to let us in very much under the hood and get a real first-hand experience of what it means to have built the business that he has, to have built the career that he has. But for you all to understand that in no way does that mean he's got it figured out, and that he's going to actually rely on so many of those same characteristics that served him well at the outset of his career to the way in which he's doing everything that he does today as well. So again, thank you, Robbie, for the time, and thank you for taking the time to listen. GrowthReady is here. We're well on our way to building what is going to be the next chapter of this podcast, and it's important that we bring you along for the ride. I want to hear what you think. Reach out to me, steve@growthready.com. That's how you can get a hold of me. I'd love to learn what you're thinking of these new episodes. In addition to that, don't hesitate to be giving me a follow at Coach Steve Mellor on Instagram, and you'll be able to see some of the behind the scenes recordings and all the kind of reels that you want to be able to catch in regards to this episode and future episodes as well. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe. This show is going to be coming out weekly. It may even come out a little bit more often than that. We're working on a few creative ideas. But in the meantime, as always, best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on in your world. I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.